Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to the Aurum podcast, where we discuss building winning teams. I'm your host. My name is Anthony Kuria, and I'm so glad that you could join with us. The Aurum podcast is hosted by Aurum Consultants Limited, human resource and risk advisory consultancy, and we are very glad that you could join with us today. I am with my co-host, the internal HR consultant, Madam Zipora Kuria. Welcome, Zippy.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers.
Yes, and our HR specialist. Yes, you have to be you have to check yourself. Waswahili walisema mganga hajigangi. So you have to have a consultant, as it were, who you can work with. And we're so glad to have Martha Tuku, a HR specialist. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Tony. Every time you introducing me, you put me under pressure to be that which you are saying. Good morning,
It's
viewers.
true.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are all under pressure, I tell you. Hosting a podcast, having a consultant within the company is also a pressure. I'm sure JP can tell you that. So we're so glad that you could join with us, Martha. And to
Thank
our
you.
viewers and listeners, thank you for taking your time to come and join with us today. Uh, this month, we are shifting gears. Last month, we discussed issues regarding training for impact, training our employees. And it's, as I said last, the training that we were carrying, we did not exhaust it, and I'm sure we'll pick it up at some point. But this month, we want to discuss disciplinary management, specifically employee disciplinary management. It's a topic that both employers and employees don't like very much because sometimes it can be nasty, sometimes it can be a bit messy. I remember when I was young, when my parents would discipline me, they would tell me, "This pains you more than it pains you." And I used to think I'm just being napakwa mafuta too. But now that I'm at that other level, I realize as an employer and as a parent, indeed, it's not a very a pleasant thing to do sometimes, but it's very important to talk about disciplinary management. As we all know, employee discipline is a necessity in any organization. What that means is that organizations need to have an effective discipline policy that helps employees understand what is expected of them and what will happen if they fail to meet the expectations. So we want to discuss how can we make disciplinary management something that can bring success to your organization. Yeah, that is what we want to discuss. And uh, before we begin, I would like to tell our viewers and our listeners, you are very welcome to send your comments, to send your questions into our chat. We are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube. We will be able to interact with any comments or questions that you may send. We are able to see them live, and uh, and therefore we will work at it to be able to answer your questions or comments, and we'll include them even as we continue discussing the same. So now, if I may ask, Zippy, I'll start with you. What is discipline management at the workplace? Let's start from there.
Thank you, Anthony. Let me start by saying that in every society, in everywhere where you find people, there has to be some sort of a discipline. There has to be some sort of a prescribed way of dealing with people, whether it's at home where you have your children, whether it's at the workplace, whether it's at the church, whether anywhere where you find there are people, you will find there's a prescribed way, things need to be done. And I think basically this is what discipline is, the prescribed way of how we do things at the workplace. How do we do things? What is the expectation? what is the expected behavior while we are at the workplace. So I would say when we're talking about discipline, we need to look at it from that perspective of when we are together, we need to have a way of doing things. We need to have the expectations. What is the employer expecting of me, or how are they expecting me to behave? And it can be described again as an adherence to the company policies, rules, regulations, processes, procedures. We are always talking about processes. We are always talking about procedures. We are always talking about rules and regulations. And basically, all these encompasses what discipline should be at the workplace and the adherence of those things that we are putting in place. So, if we have put systems in place, if we have put processes in place, if we have put rules and regulations, then how does employee come in and adhere to those set rules and regulations at the workplace? Because that is how it affects the way we behave, the way we deal with each other, the way we look at each other. And again, like I said earlier, where there are people, all these things we need to put in place, and it's for the good of the organization. When we look, and I'm sure we'll look at that as we go along, when you look at performance, when you look at the bottom line of the organization, you will always find it's pegged on how people behave at the workplace. How they do things or how they don't do eventually affects their performance. So I would say discipline is a very key element in making the organization be run smoothly and be run in a successful way.
Okay. Thank you, Zippy. Thank you for enabling us to understand why discipline is there. Because, as you know, most of us don't like that word, discipline. I mean, from childhood, I guess, because of the way it's put, we don't like the word discipline. But you've brought it so well. When just to paraphrase what you've just said, when we are together, we need norms on working together. When you have 2, 3, 4 human beings, either in a family setting, in a church setting, in a school setting, in a workplace setting, in any social gathering of sorts, there has to be norms on how we ought to behave. Of course, as you say, when it comes to since we are discussing what happens in the workplace, then there has to be. I like using the term guardrails. If you ever climb a stair, or if you are walking at an elevated position, see on like on a bridge, the psychological safety that guardrails bring. Whether it's guardrails for the cars or guardrails for human beings to walk with. Yeah, you're crossing the streets of Nairobi, those walkways that cross the streets. You appreciate how useful the guardrails are. So basically, what Zippy is saying as discipline management is basically guardrails for the workplace. But we all know these are the boundaries, and there is extreme danger if there were no boundaries because we could fall off, or there could be extreme danger if you deliberately climb off the guardrails, because now you could endanger yourself, you could endanger your colleagues, you could endanger the company and the customers. So I like the fact that you've said it's about creating guardrails for people in a social setting to know how to behave. Martha, from your take, how do you look at it from your perspective, discipline management?
Thanks, Anthony. Well, when when I saw the topic of today, I reflected back to my youth. And I remembered a few items. I remembered a muiko, a slipper.
Yeah.
I don't know what you remember. A
Don't
belt.
ask. Don't ask. Don't ask.
Maybe a sufuria or a pan.
Oh my.
So those are the things that came to mind when I thought
Yeah.
about this topic.
Yeah.
And it hit me that an institution is not just a workplace. An institution is the family institution. It's where you are at right now. So that time we had our parents who had their boundaries,
Yes.
which we needed to keep. And should we not keep?
Yes.
Then the only problem with those rules, they were not written. And if you look even at your own house now, we have children,
Yes.
I'm sure you have your own rules. You have boundaries,
Yes.
and they may never be written because for a family setup, kind of they keep coming up. They keep changing.
Yes.
There are times I would feel like my mom has changed. What she had
The
said
rule.
last time is not what she's saying now. So at the end of the day, what we are trying to say is that in every setup where there are more than one person, then there needs to be some boundaries in that relationship for that relationship to thrive. And when I remembered again at the workplace, my mind just went back to the bank, and I remembered collective agreement and everything that came with it. And so it hit me, for institutions, it will be different. The boundaries are the same, but the really the management of it is different in every aspect. The most
Yes.
important thing is that you have some action that you take,
Yes.
uh, written actions, that you take when an employee does not follow the policies, the processes, the boundaries, which first of all you have trained. So you can't discipline someone for boundaries they are not even aware. So there must be policies that then when they are violated, then there is a discipline issue. Um, so there it is written and it is educated, and you are told, by the way, when you violate, then A, B, C, D will happen. So that's how management comes in. The managing of that and ensuring that it is positive. The end result is growth. It's not punishment. The end result is a focus on growth, yeah, and improvement, yeah. So
Yes.
if you look at the labor laws, you find that they have something they call first warning, second warning, third warning.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, the spirit is growth. So, Zippy, you did A, B, C, D. Please stop, because if you continue, A, B, C, D will happen. So, if Zippy stops from there, it means she has learned from that and she has moved on. But then, if she repeats the same issue or break that boundary, then the
Yes.
second warning comes. Maybe we had told you last time. You did A, B, C, D, and now you have even repeated. So when she does that time, it shows this is a character issue. This is not someone you'd want to be. And then you go through the process. And for our labor laws, it is actually prescribed, the process that needs to be followed. Mostly in this podcast, we like talking to employers, and you will find most of our followers are SMEs. And it's so important that they know that even if you have your own small organization, you can't just wake up and say, Martha, I don't want to see you anymore, leave my office. It
Very
can
true.
be very expensive for you. So, and that's why the issue of discipline management. How then are we supposed to do this? And I would refer you as an SME owner, just go to the Employment Act 2007. It is even in the internet. Read through so that you get to know what to do. And I'm sure even as we discuss this, these things will come out. Um, Even at later podcasts, it will come out what exactly you need to do, because then it can really be very expensive for you, and people are very annoying. You can have a very annoying staff, but you don't have, legally, you are not entitled to just tell them to up and go as long as they are in employment. So let me just say that whole scenario is what is called discipline management. And I want to stop it here because I'm sure Zippy wants to add more. Thank you.
Zippy, you are muted.
Sorry. Mother, you say something that is very interesting and is important for us to actually be aware about this. You can't discipline someone for boundaries you have set and they are not aware about those boundaries. And I go back to what Mother was talking about, the collective bargaining agreement, where you can get challenged. Yes, an employee has done something so gross, yet there are rules that are in place, but this employee has no clue, and you'll be challenged to show where you have trained this person and they are aware about some of these rules. And I always say it's easy for us to make things better for ourselves, to make things easier for ourselves by, number one, setting those rules and regulations, setting those processes and putting them in place, but not just putting them in place in paper. Take a step further and train your employees, because the purpose of putting them is to help the employees know how to behave, what is expected, and the consequences of certain behaviors. Sometimes we'll tell employees you're expected to come to work at 8, and it's not clear why they need to come at work at 8, or maybe if they come to work at 8:30, what is the consequence to that? So we leave it as an assumption and we assume they know, and they know the consequences. We've had situations where an employee will probably even take something from the workplace, and in their view, probably they are not stealing, and you come and accuse them they have stolen. And in their mind, they're thinking, I have taken, I'm paying for it. What is the procedure of taking that thing away from the office? What is the prescribed way of doing this? Have we told them? Have we trained them? Have we helped them to understand? Mother said something very important, and I see this every day with the SMEs, unfortunately. And sometimes I don't know whether it's lack of knowing, what the law requires of us. When an employee will do something that is gross, and if you're an employee and you're listening to us, you need to behave the way you're expected to behave by your employer, because your employer also has rights. But on the other hand, an employee does something and you wake up in the morning and you don't want to see their face in the office, and you actually send them away and you terminate them, they never come back, or you send them on suspension, you never recall them back. So what has happened? Basically, you have terminated that employee without following any due process. And the question is not always whether the employee did something wrong. The question is always, did you follow the right procedure? Was process followed? Was there fairness? So if you make sure you have these policies we are talking in place, you have the rules and regulations in place, you have trained your employees on the expectations, and you have actually implemented the same, then things become easy. We've seen other situations where again, these policies are in place. Today you apply them, tomorrow you don't apply them, or you don't apply them fully. Again, this becomes a problem because you're setting a precedence. If you set the wrong precedence, then becomes very difficult to actually implement the discipline management system in your organization. So what I would want to say is it's important for us to have these things in writing, but let's implement them through training and making sure we are following through with what we have said we need to do.
And Zippy, you have said something interesting there that maybe I can add on. So we can even have them in writing. It is from where I work, very dynamic organization, and even where I've come from, even in the bank, when you get employed, then you are taken through orientation, and part of the orientation is the boundaries on the boundaries to work in that organization. In my current organization, we educate on zero tolerance. We have zero tolerance policies. We have the code of conduct, which then when you violate, really results to termination. Now, what happens? What would happen if an organization that does not apply the principles Zippy has said of fairness, meaning that we have these policies, but some people can violate and nothing can happen to them, while others violate and, we go through the whole process. So that fairness, the organization need to be seen to be fair. It doesn't matter at what level that person is, as long as they have broken the boundaries need to be taken through that process that we have decided this is how we work in this organization. And if you violate at whatever level, you will be
Mm,
taken through this disciplinary process. And that's why that discipline management needs to be written down so that
mm.
all of us knows that should I violate, I will go, this is how this organization manages discipline, and I'll go through it. And if I'm found guilty at the end, there's a way that we may separate with the organization. So the consistency, the fair dealings is so key in managing discipline, because when you are doing it for one and you're not doing it for another, then that brings the organization's reputation is at risk. Thank you.
Wow, wow, ladies, you have really brought this very, very well. Issues regarding disciplinary management, and to any of our viewers and listeners who maybe you're running your business, you are a senior manager, you are the entrepreneur owning, and you're wondering, okay, are you guys giving me a hammer to work with? What we are saying is, yes, you have a hammer, but that hammer is used very wisely. As you've heard, employees also have recourse. The laws of Kenya employment laws make sure that employees have a recourse in case they are unfairly dismissed. But at the same time, you as an employer, it helps you put get organized by putting these processes and procedures in place, written. And as Mother has said, the best practice is induct your employees immediately they come in. Put them through a process of induction for them to know, first of all, to understand the company, to understand the job they're doing, but on terms of disciplinary management, to know what are the absolute boundaries that you've put in place in your company. What is the code of conduct? What constitutes unacceptable conduct? For them to read, to hear, to understand, and to sign. As Zippy has said, you may be in a place where they may take you to court and they ask you, okay, you said I should not be coming drunk. Where did you write down that intoxication is an issue? So if you have something written down, that becomes something that they understand and they can sign. Because when there is a need for disciplinary procedures to be put into place, then we are very clear that we understood and we have violated, and these are the consequences. And you know, ladies, there's something you've said there, Martha, also, that disciplinary management should be positive. It should be growth oriented, not punishment oriented. That's something to our entrepreneurs who are listening to us, to business owners, to top managers. This is the purpose. Because remember, the people that you're hiring are your most important assets. They're your most important, they're more important than the machinery that you imported from China to come and do your business. They're more important than that new shiny system that you have. So you've got to think about this thing from a positive minded plane where it should be the whole issue of disciplinary management is based on growth, based on positive. Like, guys, we are heading towards this direction. This is our vision. This is our mission. These are the guardrails that we've put in place to enable all of us go through that, use that path. Because, Martha, as you've said, disciplinary management also goes right up to management. We have seen the other day, not in Kenya, this past week, a CEO was forced to resign. I think it was in Europe. He was forced to resign because of a very small thing. I think I don't know what he was watching. He was caught watching some dirty stuff on his phone in meetings. So I think the CCTVs caught the dude. He's a CEO who, I don't know how it was discovered that he was watching funny things on their phone during company meetings, and it was exposed. So, as you say, the rules have to apply. So, since he's the CEO, but he's also an employee of the company, the hammer landed on him, and he had to hand in his resignation because he was caught. So, disciplinary management is across the board. Even board of directors can be kicked out at the board level if they are found to be violating the rules of the company. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is not something just for employees, it's across the board. As long as you're involved in an entity called a business organization, then disciplinary management works for all. Now, our time is really going, and I had another question. I had a question that I thought representing uh, employees and employers out there who would want to find out why is it necessary to have a clear disciplinary mechanism in place? Zippy, probably you could give us briefly, or you could give us, not briefly, but in depth, why is it necessary to have a clear disciplinary mechanism in place?
Thank you, Anthony. Let me start by saying that discipline is the bridge between the goals and accomplishments. If we are going to accomplish any goals, if we are going to accomplish our objectives, there must be discipline at the workplace. And that shows you how important discipline it is. It shows you how important it is to have a very clear disciplinary mechanism in place, because if it's going to affect the bottom line, then we need to actually be alert and be awake to the fact that we need to have a clear discipline mechanism in place. And if we don't have, that's why we are talking about it today. Where do we start? How do we start putting these things in place so that they don't start affecting the bottom line? The other thing I would say is important because it gives a clear direction. Employees know the do's, the don'ts, the why nots, and what would happen if they violate those policies that have been put in place. Again, why is it important to have a clear discipline mechanism? Again, Mother has touched on this. For equity, for making sure you're being fair to everyone, from the bottom to the top. When someone has a disciplinary issue, is the process the same? Is there clarity on what we need to do? Or is it a guesswork where Zipporah wakes up and decides, this person, I don't like them too much. This is how I'm going to handle them, you know? Or is it an issue of, there's a very clear guideline? This is a process, this is a procedure we follow when there is a violation of this policy. And these are the consequences, and they are very clear. A lot of times you get into a disciplinary meeting and you find there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of arguments. And sometimes you realize this employee probably doesn't actually have all the facts. They don't know. But whose responsibility is it to make sure they are trained and they know? Again, an importance of having a very clear discipline mechanism in place. The other thing I would say is it creates an atmosphere of respect for the human relations at the workplace. When you have a clear mechanism, there's respect. It's not going to be an issue of who said what, when, how, or who has a godfather somewhere, or who has
Yes.
someone protecting them. It's about we are respecting each other. These are the guidelines. This is what needs to be followed. It's not about I am your friend at the workplace and you can't deal with me when I've done something wrong. So it's important for us to know having a clear disciplinary mechanism helps us in so many, many ways. If I am working with Martha and Martha is my friend, it can be very difficult for Martha to discipline me when I've done something so gross. But when there's a very clear mechanism, it's not about our friendship, it's
Yes.
about facts. It's about this is a process in place, this is what you have done, these are the consequences to it. And it's nothing personal. We are talking about facts, we are talking about what is expected and what is required, and we are able to differentiate between the two. So it's important for us to look at those things and make sure the mechanism is very clear and it has no gray areas. Because when there are gray areas, again, it also leaves room for manipulation. When the mechanism is not very clear, I will challenge you with it. And the truth is, we all know about law in one way or the other because we are either reading, from the internet, or we've been enlightened by our friends or whatever. But it's important when it's very clear for our organization because it does not leave any room for guesswork or for any gray areas that can be manipulated.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Zippy. Martha, what's your take on the necessity of clear disciplinary mechanism?
Thanks once again, Tony. Even as Zippy was talking, I was thinking through and it hit me that a clear disciplinary mechanism is so important in an organization. But I was reflecting back at the various instances where I have dealt with disciplinary issues, especially when they are relating to a senior member of staff. So you can have the mechanism. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's a mindset thing or a culture thing that mostly the senior members of staff, we can have this mechanism, but they feel like they are removed from the mechanism, that they are free to do the things that
True.
they are doing. And so
Whatever.
in some instances where I have dealt with a disciplinary relating to a senior member of staff, and even for any category anyway, you'll find that the person, when they're giving their defense, they keep concentrating on the work they have done for the organization. They bring their achievements. If it's in the bank, when I came to this branch, sijui we had this. Now I'm here. So and you're trying to say it has nothing to do with your performance. This one, maybe it's a safeguarding issue, because then you are very good at your work, but how are you being good at that work? So you find we separate ourselves, and we really want to show how much we are doing for the organization versus how we are doing it. And so those are the challenges I keep getting. And when in HR department, you really like are a balancing act. So you have to balance that, and especially when you are disciplining a senior member of staff, you have to balance that and trying to make them understand, by the way, it is not you, it is the mechanism we have in place, which you should be helping me run, because you are a senior person. We have said when someone violates the rules, the policies, the regulations, whichever, this is what we will follow. And this is now what we are doing, which you should help me follow, instead of now coming, like now the HR becomes the enemy. I'm not your enemy. When we put these policies, we were all together. And this is what we said. So whatever disciplinary mechanism we have, it is not separate from you as a manager. You will go through it as I will go through it. Should I violate the rules, even at a HR position? So that clear mechanism is very important, because then we will not have to decide, oh, Tony is a director, so how should we discipline him? Zippy is a small person. That one can go yesterday. That, in fact, what are they doing in the organization? So it helps just that clarity, that at whatever level you are, should you violate law A, B, C, D, this is the mechanism. If it's performance issues, this is how the mechanism we will deal with. If it's safeguarding issues, and you will find even in the Employment Act, actually they have articulated the things that can amount to something we call summary dismissal. It's all articulated. So even when we are taking you through this mechanism, whatever we have written, most of it we have borrowed from the law and put it in our policies. So it has nothing to do with the organization. There must be a prescribed clear way to discipline people, because we are human beings. There's a way, there are some people who do it by commission and others by omission. So you don't wake up, Tony, today to be a bad person.
Yes.
But you find yourself, you could do something with good intention, it goes south, and then you have to go through that mechanism. And the good thing with the mechanism is that it can find you guilty or not guilty.
Guilty. Yeah.
That's why you need the mechanism, because it can speak for you, because no one wakes up to be a bad person. However, we also have people who are crude. They are sleeping, thinking what tomorrow they can do to earn an extra amount. They are sleeping, think, oh, where is our policies relaxed? So they use the system to enrich themselves. There are such people, and so that's why the mechanism is there, because it helps you go through the process, and with the investigations you'll be able to find out, is this person really a bad person, or did, out of their duties, they did this, and they didn't want to harm the organization, versus the one who did because the system allows them to get a $1 or two by manipulating the system. So that's why the a clear discipline mechanism is there, because it really separates the issues, and it separates the positions, and then it puts everyone at the same table, whether you are an office assistant down there or you are the head of the organization. The mechanism is one, and when we follow it nicely, you'll find people want to work in such an organization. Thank you.
And
Wow,
just to
thank you,
pick up
Papa.
on what Martha has just said, Tony, just to highlight on that, when you're dealing with discipline issues, a lot of times you'll find it's in either two ways. It's either compliance issues or it's either behavioral issues. What Mother was saying about when you're giving someone the first warning, the second warning, we are trying to see how are we helping this person, because the end goal is not to actually terminate this person. The end goal is to put a corrective measure and help this person stay on course. And if we start looking at this probably in depth, we'll be able to look at what are these issues, what are these compliance issues or behavioral issues that would actually lead into a disciplinary hearing. And Mother has mentioned something, and the child tends to get in a lot of trouble, and they start becoming the enemy of the employee because they are the ones who are cracking the whip. They are the ones who are having to, to give guidance when it comes to disciplinary management. So I think at the end of the day, if as employees we can understand those issues that would make us get into challenges, that would cause us get into a disciplinary process, then it will become easier for us to actually, navigate and stay away from problems and basically serve the purpose why we've been engaged. Because I believe when you have engaged an employee, they are qualified to do the job. But sometimes you wonder what happens along
True.
the way, that issues start arising. Again, when I look at the way human beings are wired, if there are no guidelines, all of us have our own different opinions, we have our own ideas, we have, and very good ideas in this matter. But if there's no clear guidance, then it can become very chaotic at the workplace because no one will listen to the other person because everyone will always think their opinion is better. So I would think it's important for us to understand also the issues that would get us into challenges, and we can discuss that as we go along.
And a
Right,
last
all right.
point, ZP, let me say a last
Yes.
point of why we should have clear disciplinary mechanism. I remember is it a month ago, a few months ago, where we invited a labor lawyer in this podcast. And you know what she said? Should you terminate someone and that person goes to court, the court does not look at what the person has done. The court looks at the mechanism you have put in place and the procedure you have followed. So the court actually looks at the procedure. Yeah, not the fact that this person has disappeared with your 1 million. So it's a procedure. So that's why it has to be clear, because then, and it's documented, because then when you go to court, that is what you produce, that this is the disciplinary mechanism in the organization, and this is how we have followed it. I needed to remind us that, because that shocked me when she said that. Then it hit me, why, when even someone has stolen and it's obvious, then still that person wins the case because
Yeah.
of the mechanism that has been followed, It's not the prescribed one. Thank you.
Looks like there's a lag on Tony's side. I think, Martha, you've said something very important. That the legal fraternity, they
Okay.
look
I
at the
hope I'm
process that has
audible.
they look at the process that has been followed. And I've found myself in a scenario where an employer said, this person has stolen. Don't I have the right to fire them? Of course, you do have a right to fire them. But what is the process? And when I dug deep, I realized they don't have a clear mechanism of dealing with a disciplinary process. They don't know how to deal with this. So guess what they will do? They will say, you know what, tomorrow don't come to work. And that's it, you're fired. Guess what will happen if this employer is taken to court? They will end up paying very dearly. And imagine how painful it is paying an employee who has already stolen from you, or an employee who has done something so gross, yet it ends up costing you more money as an employer. So it's important for us to also make sure, the mechanism is clear and is understandable. I think we have a comment from Douglas Nyamori. Thank you for your wonderful insights. Thank you, Douglas, for your support. Any comments on incorporating the Employment and Labor Laws Act in the company policies? Maybe, Mother, you can give us insights on that.
Yeah, as I said earlier, ZP, you will find, even as we put policies in our organizations, most of, especially the specific things, we will buy from the Employment Act. So there's at no point should the policy should be better than the Employment Act. So the minimum should be the Employment Act in your policy. If it's a disciplinary procedure, in whatever it is that is articulated by law, all you can do is make it better in your policy. The minimum must be what the law says. And if you look at, I don't know about the policies in your organizations, but from the places I have worked, the disciplinary mechanism is exactly what is prescribed in the labor laws. So we buy it, we actually copy paste it. If we want to make it better, we make it better, but that should be the minimum. And what I realized is, when you're giving someone a contract, you can put any violations in the Employment Act, and you are expecting that the employees will look for that Employment Act and read. So it's so important to actually copy paste it. And at times it's good even to put it in the employment letter itself, that these are the issues that can bring you issues in the organization. So you just copy paste. Make sure you replicate what is in the Employment Act, or you make it better. So that's what I would say about that. Thank you.
And Mother, just to add on to that, I've seen scenarios where actually, and this is to HRs, where they formulated HR policies, but they are not necessarily anchored on the labor laws. Now, it's important for us to be aware, and I got this actually from a senior HR legal advisor. It's important for us to be aware. HR policies must be anchored on the labor laws. If they deviate, then it becomes an illegal document. So there's a heavy borrowing from the Employment Act, but the HR policies also should make it better and make the management of the organization much easier and much smoother. Because if you don't do that, then again it becomes an illegal document. So I think that's what I wanted to add. I can see Anthony is back. I don't know if they can hear us. And maybe I can tackle one more question before we bring it to a close from Caleb. Again, on still the same issues. Great insights. How would you deal with protocol deviance from a consultant expert on a short contract? For instance, a knowledgeable consultant who delivers but doesn't represent the organization values. I think if I could comment on this, and in my view, experts or consultants do not work in isolation. They must work within the organization values. They must work within the organization boundaries. And I think this needs to be put very clearly to them. Yes, they are not full-time employees, but I always say, and with organizations that I've worked with and their consultants, we still take them through an orientation process. We still help them understand these are the boundaries. And when you put them through that, then they understand if I deviate from this, then there are consequences. And this needs to be embedded on their contract, that they need to actually adhere to the Kanban policies, they need to adhere to the Kanban procedures, and they cannot work in isolation. Because if they do that, then you start having challenges and you can't do anything about it. So I would say in such a situation, please make sure you let them understand these are our values and you are bound by these values. These are our policies and our procedures. You are bound by these policies and procedures. You might not be an employee per se, but again, deviation from the same could lead to termination of your contract. So that is also very clear for everyone because they're not working in isolation. Again, touching on what Mother has said on the policies, when we are giving employees contracts, it's important for us to also make sure they understand and make sure you also put it in writing, a comment, a paragraph, that the contract is not the only document that binds them to the workplace. There is a policies that will bind them. There is a labor laws that would bind them. And there are, all these other documents that would actually constitute, the total employment documents. So make sure you also put those things so that employees understand, and it's not a guesswork. Because if you don't do that, then you will have a lot of challenges when issues arise. And I think that is what I would say.
Yeah, and like Caleb, maybe what I can add, even when this consultant is applying for whatever consultancy you're giving, there should be clauses where they should sign that they will abide with their organization's values, because the organization has core values, and this is the way we do things here. And for you to work with us, then this is what you should follow. There's a keen interest on safeguarding currently, and like for us, what we have done, we have made sure there's a clause in our employment contracts, in our consultant contracts, there's a clause down there regarding violation of that policy, because it is being driven by the government, and I work with a donor organization, it's also being driven by the donors. So it has to appear in the consultancy agreements. It has to appear even in our advertisements for positions. It has to appear even in your employment contract. And we take it very seriously, because then should you violate, then we will use that clause against you. That's what I can add for Caleb. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Douglas, for your comments. We appreciate. And we would like to say thank you for joining us today. And I think this brings us to the end of our podcast. Our host is seemingly having some challenges. Anthony, are you back? Okay, so this brings us to the end of our
Yes, I
podcast
am.
today. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing
Yes, I am.
next
Can you hear me?
week, same place, same time. Do reach out to us if you need support in putting policies in place for your organization. If you need trainings, we will be happy to support your organization. Until next week, God bless you.